Welcome to Timberline Bass Podcast, your place for Wisconsin bass fishing and everything outdoors.
Today's guest is someone who wears a lot of hats in the fishing industry. He's a longtime tournament angler at the highest levels, currently fishing the Bassmaster Opens, and has built one of the most educational YouTube channels in bass fishing. Uh, and on top of all of that, one of the co-founders of Core Tackle, a company that's brought some truly innovative products to anglers everywhere. We're gonna touch a little bit on the opens this year. The realities of professional fishing, what it's like growing a YouTube channel, and actually building baits that help anglers catch more fish. So without further ado, here's Matt Stefan. How's it going, Matt?
Dalton?
Not
Good.
too bad. Cooking in the sun all day today. As crappy as the spring was, I could do without the heat.
Yeah, we up north here, we definitely melt a little bit different when we're talking about 95-degree days.
Yeah. Um, So you've had a pretty busy year so far. How would you summarize your open season up to this point?
Man. Ah, yeah, this has been one of those years where I feel like I've got 35 different things I want to accomplish, whether it's tournament related or core tackle related or just industry related. And every time I check a box, I feel like there's two or three more things I add to my list. So I mean, it's been a year where I feel like I've accomplished a decent amount tournament wise. I feel like, man, I've had my opportunities. I think I want to say all four of the Bass Opens, I was right around the top third of the field or better. I only cashed in one of those, but I think if I look back at all four events, I had a fish on, at least one fish on that would have put me in the money in all four events. So, as anglers, we always think about the ones that got away and not really how well we actually did do. Um, I qualified for the EQs. I was 31st or 32nd, I think, in points in Division Two. So, out of 200 guys, that's not terrible. Um, and it got me to kind of what I wanted to do, which was qualify for the EQs and give yourself a shot at making the elites. So those start up in September, and we'll see how that rolls.
So you kind of touch on it a little bit. You are in a very unique position. I mean, all of us as anglers, we've got life going on, but I mean, you've got your hand in so many cookie jars between the YouTube and Core Tackle,
Yeah.
and I mean, how do you prioritize what's really the top of the board, or is it a day by day thing?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any prioritizing. It's really like here's the reality of it is, so I've worked the corporate world for 12 years and then made a switch almost kind of cold turkey just completely into fishing. Like I had started fishing the FLW tour at the time, which was one of the top two leagues, and I did that for 3 years, but I was not having the success that I wanted. And I felt like if I was going to really try to make a living in fishing, I had to give up my full-time job and really go head over heels. So I did that at the time. And it's really allowed me to live a much happier life. Like now I've got different stress. Like I had a great job before, so financially I didn't really have the financial stress, especially I didn't have kids at the time. I wasn't married for most of it. And it was like, man, I'm doing just fine. I'm happy. I have a boat. I got a truck. I can fish on the weekends. But I really wanted to pursue a career in the industry. So I gave that up cold turkey and jumped into it. And it's led me, I don't know, that was in 2013, 2014. So 12 years later, I've gotten to the place where I'm at now, where I've got my hands kind of all over the place, which is great. And the reality is my stress now is based on not having enough time in the day to do everything. Like so it's good. Like that to me, I think that's great. Like I don't fish as much as I want to fish. I don't fish as many tournaments as I want to fish. I have all these ideas for YouTube. I have all these ideas for Core Tackle. I want to make more sponsor related content. So it's kind of like I'm doing everything. I just don't have enough time to do everything. And the reality is it's all, for the most part, it's enjoyable. I mean, it's all based around fishing. So I love that aspect of it. I just kind of wish I had a few extra hours in the day because I really don't have enough time as it is to do everything.
Well, and that's one thing I've always really appreciated with you. No matter what's going on in the season, you always seem to have such a positive attitude about everything. And you almost seem to thrive in chaos.
Yeah. That honestly, that's true. Like I've the more I feel like I'm being stressed, the like and stretched in different directions, the more I kind of feel like I've performed better over time. So whether that's tournaments or, anything in business, I don't know if it's a matter of performing under stress or if the stress or the idea of needing to accomplish those things really is what drive me. In reality, though, like, I've been fortunate enough to move everything in the right direction. It does seem like when you do have a hurdle, I've been able to overcome it. When one door closes, I have another one open. And I'm really a firm believer of if you're doing something you're passionate about and you're willing to put in the time and effort, opportunities will come. It's just a matter of taking advantage of those when they come around.
Um,
But to be
you know,
honest with you, like I am a positive individual, but I'm more of a pessimist when it comes to things. Like, I mean, and that's one of those things where, like with Core Tackle, I feel like my partner Johnny Schultz, who's the other owner, he and I are such perfect complements because he is like this visionary, right? Like he's this grand picture, and I'm kind of more the realist, where I'm like, well, we got to do this, this, and this to get to that, right? And I think I kind of bring him back to earth, but he lifts me up and makes me see the bigger picture too. So it's just one of those things where I feel like it's having that viewpoint as much as I am very positive with things. Like with respect to tournaments, I'm the guy that uh I'm never satisfied, right? Like even when I have a good day, I'm just like, man, the one that got away, or I should have made this move. And I think that's actually what drives me. Like, when I have a good bag in the boat, you're sitting on a good, if you're fishing whatever derby it is, if you got a good weight, you've got a good weight. I think some people cash it in at that point. And I'm always like, I got to get rid of that little one, right? Like I always want to get a little bit better. And I think that that's helpful to me in a lot of what I do. I think sometimes it honestly, like if you were just to see me like standing at the weigh-in line, you'd probably look at me and be like, why is he so mad? And I've got what they call like resting bitch face, right? Like, so if I'm not smiling or talking, people are like, why is he so mad? And it's like, that's just I'm sorry, that's just what I look like. And the reality is like every time I can't tell you how often people come up to me and they're like, I didn't know you. If they don't know my YouTube personality or whatever, which is exactly what I am like in person. But they're always like, oh, I just saw you from afar. I thought you were mad, but I got talking with you and you're like this cool dude. And I'm like, well, thanks. I appreciate that. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not trying to look mad. It just, if I'm standing in the corner by myself, I sometimes give off this impersonation or this impression that I'm, mad at the world. And it's like, no, not at all.
oh, and I will say too, the first time I ever had any real interaction with you was at the St. Jude a few years back, and I could kind of see that when you were standing on the dock. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should bug him or not. But as soon as we got bullshit, and I mean, you are one of the
Yeah.
most approachable guys there is.
Dude, well, and that's how I've always felt that way about the fishing industry. I mean, we all are addicted anglers, is how I look at it, especially if you're in bass tournaments. Like we've all got this addiction to the sport, which means we have something very much in common. And if we can't get along because of this bond that we have, I mean, I feel like something's wrong with us at that point. But the reality is, like, we all love bass fishing, so why would I not want to talk bass fishing with somebody else at that point? I mean, that's really how I look at it. And the industry is really small to begin with, whether local level up to the national level, it's small. So I think it's cool to have a bond with somebody. So I grew up in Chicago, and there was nobody else in my high school that, like, there was one other guy that fished, but it wasn't like tournament fish. And I mean, I was able to convince my dad, I think it was my junior year in high school, to fish local tournaments on the Fox Channel Lakes. And we didn't know what we were doing, but I've had this, I always had this bug. I read Bassmaster magazine every time it came. I knew all the stats. I was a information hound when it came to fishing stuff. And but it was one of those things where growing up where I grew up, I was definitely the oddball. Like I didn't partake in high school, a lot of high school sports, because it interfered with me being like going fishing. That was not a common thing. Like I know living here in Wisconsin now, there's a lot more of that. Like people are just eating up with the outdoors. But like in Chicago, like in the city of Chicago where I grew up, it was like, this guy, what is wrong with him? So like when I started fishing tournaments and I came up to UWSP, Wisconsin at Stevens Point here, and went to school with a bunch of other, fishing nerds like me, it was like, oh, I found my place. So when I go to tournaments, it's like I just feel like I'm around the people that love what I love. And growing up, I did not have around me at all.
Well, and I think that's honestly, at least from the outside, one of the biggest draws with your YouTube channel and everything. You're so real. I love the family dynamic, how that pops in. I mean, you just
Yeah.
when I was down at the Classic this year, there are so many guys that are not the persona they are on TV or on the big stage, and I think you really play that to your advantage. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that was like, not, I have not done anything with YouTube that's truly by like this big grand plan. It was really a function of that's just kind of who I am. And I have never been the guy to be like, oh, I'm gonna put on this persona. I would, you would be able to point that out in a heartbeat if I tried to show like over excitement or something, along the lines of just craziness. And I just started doing the videos the way I would do it, which has always been more educational based. And do I mix in some quirkiness? Absolutely. Like I've done some goofy videos, but they're videos that I truly think are entertaining or funny to myself. And my approach has always been more along the lines of like I would rather look back on a lot of my YouTube stuff as like a way to watch my family grow up. Like I never had this intention to do as much as I do, but now that I've had kids while I'm doing it and the kids are growing up, it's kind of a lot of it is almost like just stuff that I enjoy doing and having my kids involved. And it's like maybe one day, I don't know that I will, but maybe one day when they're grown up and out of the house, I'll be like, I want to see what the boys were like when they were 5, and I'll go back and watch a video or watch some of my Wednesday nighters where, it's like it's just it's a frustrating thing to do sometimes to have 2 little boys in your boat when they're going through everything and you're trying to fish a tournament. Like that, it brings a smile to my face. So yeah, YouTube is a funny thing, right? Like I think you've got people that really dive into it, try to make the best content, try to make the best content for the algorithm, just really focus on it. And I'm kind of like, it's part of my job. I view it as part of my job now at this point, but I don't stress about the numbers. I don't stress about trying to make algorithm based videos. I 100% realize a lot of the videos I'm going to put out, I've made for myself or I've made for like just like I do a lot of rod building, right? I know if I do a rod building video, it's not going to get the views another video will make or will get, but I like rod building. And I know that there's a lot of people that like my rod building videos. So it's like, I'm going to make a rod building video. I know it's not going to perform well, but I enjoy it. So I'm going to do it. Right. So it's like, I don't make the decisions with YouTube, with some grand plan that it's going to help me achieve big YouTube goals.
well, and I think it's neat too. I kind of grew up in your kid's position. When I was a kid, my dad fished the ever starts and stuff,
Mhm.
and every memory I have as a kid is in the boat with my dad. And I think
Yeah.
that's so cool that they will have the opportunity someday to look back on that time with you and be able to see that. I wish that was a thing when I was growing up. It would be kind of neat to look back on some of that stuff.
Yeah. It really is kind of like, when we were growing up, it was like you've got some kind of faded old photos, right? Some of them are like Polaroids and some of them are just like, just not anything great photos. And now everything is so video based that it's kind of replaced the idea of actual physical photos that we had when we were kids. And again, I don't know that I'll ever go back. For all I know, YouTube's gonna like close all the old videos or shut down, and I'll lose all that footage, right? But it's just kind of my viewpoint is, I'm if the kids like I do not go out and grab my kids and say we're making a video. If the kids are in the
Right.
video, it's almost always because they want to be in the video, or it's like we're doing something as a family, or it's like I want to make a video, like for summer months are kind of this way. Like I want to go fishing, but the kids are home from school. So it's, hey kids, let's load up. We'll go fish. We'll go pull up on the beach. You guys can swim. You can fish. We can do whatever, but I'm going to make a video while we're on the water. And it works out great. I mean, generally speaking, I fish for about an hour and they do whatever they want for the remaining time we're out there. But it's good enough to allow me to make a video, and it's spending time together and getting them outside. And I think that's important.
Have you had to pull any hooks out of kids yet?
Man, knock on wood, no. I am fearful of that day. Um, I'm if my older boy was down here right now, and I said, Hank, how many times do I tell you when we're on the water, like watch out for your brother, or look over your shoulder when you're casting? He would probably just roll his eyes and be like, every other cast. But that's like I try to ingrain it in both boys that, it's a lot easier to watch where you're casting than to take a hook out. And assuming the hook's not in any place you really don't want to hook, it's not that big of a deal, but I would rather not deal with with them because I know they would freak out if that happened. But no, it
Yeah,
hasn't. Knock on wood, it has not happened yet.
that's good. That's my biggest fear. I'm terrified of needles, and I finally, for the first time this year, had to rip a hook out. So hopefully you don't have to deal with that. I can't imagine
That's
with two
your
little
first
kids.
time ever?
Yep, and I
Oh
did it
wow.
tying baits in the garage. That was the worst
Yeah.
part.
I've been there, done that too. I honestly I was really good. The first time I ever did it, I was probably 18 or 19, and I was I was fishing a little shad rap on a really light, medium light spinning rod, and I had a pike bite that shad rap off, and the only other one I had was like one of the big. I want to say it was like a size 9. It was a big shad rap, but I put it on the same rod. And the first cast I went back to cast, and the rod was it was an ultralight basically. It whipped all the way back around, and the bait caught me in the
Oh,
back. And I had my dad had to take 4 hooks out because I had 2 of each treble hook in. But like that was when I was 18, 19. I don't know that I had it happen again until, I was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. And now I feel like it's once or twice a year, which probably just means I'm getting clumsy in my old age. I actually,
yeah.
the worst one I ever did, you can kind of see I got musky baits all up here.
Yep.
And I grabbed, I went to grab one of the boxes off the top shelf, and I grabbed it and brought my hand down, and my thumb caught one of those musky hooks, and I had it all the way like it was basically the whole big I don't know what size treble hooks those are, like 3/0 treble hooks. It was like in my thumb, and my wife was home, and I just walked upstairs with the musky bait in my hand. I'm like, you're gonna have to help me with this, and she almost passed out on me. It was one where you had to like I had to push it through and cut it off. It was a ordeal, but yeah, that was similar to like being in the garage, right? I mean, you're not expecting it, and it just happens.
Yep. Kind of sticking with some of the mental game stuff. With your positive attitude and everything, how do you stop a bad event from snowballing? That's something I've always really struggled with.
From event to event, you mean like snowballing
Yeah.
a series of events? Yeah. Man, I mean, I guess the biggest thing is if I have a bad event, I always look at the next event as a completely new tournament, right? Like, there's nothing related to the last one that should carry over to the next one. It's kind of the idea of you get to redeem yourself, and go from there. Now, I mean, I will say it does feel like in fishing, if you're not fishing well, it does seem to kind of flow. I would argue in a lot of instances there's more of a mental aspect to that than like a fishing aspect. I think if we're not in a good mental place, maybe you got something else stressing you out or something else that you're thinking about. Um, if that stuff lingers for, it can linger for a year or 2 years. I'm just throwing things out there, right? If somebody's
Yeah.
having a bad time with their spouse, like that probably is causing deeper issues in their head, or maybe somebody's health isn't good. Like I think those are things that tend to lead to poor decision making and lead to bad tournaments more than the idea of like, well, your fishing game is just going downhill. Like I don't think we necessarily lose like our skill level. I think it a lot of times it's more mental. But so if I'm using that approach, I try to block everything else outside of fishing anytime I'm like in tournament mode, which I think is easier said than done for sure. But I try to block everything else out, and I just try to view each tournament as a completely separate tournament. Um, and try to learn from the tournament before where you didn't do well. Like what mistakes did I potentially make, or what did I miss? And it does seem like a lot of times you can apply, assuming the tournaments are somewhat close together or somewhat regionally close together, time based or regionally based. It does seem like a lot of times, for whatever reason, something's going on in that area, where maybe a forage hatch is happening or something where you can take what you missed in that first tournament and apply it to the next one.
Um, would you say you noticed any different mental challenges as you worked up the levels? I mean, is there anything that's more challenging on the professional level compared to the club level?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so one thing that I won't say I've struggled with, but I've really tried to work on to the point, and I've talked about this before, where I've had an actual like mental coach, a coach to kind of just strengthen your mental perspective. And one of the reasons I went and I actually started working with her is because what bothered me was I felt like if I rolled into a local tournament, or upper Midwest tournament, I felt like I was there to take everyone else's money. But when I rolled into a national level tournament, it felt more like I was there to survive, right? Like, and that bothered me how like I felt like I was, you know, the king or the lion or whatever rolling into a local tournament versus like I'm just one of the pack. So I really spent a lot of time working to try to get that mindset changed. And I think I've done a good job towards that. The reality is like to be consistently like way at the top in standings at the professional level is just a lot harder. So I don't know that that expectation should always be there. There's only a handful of guys that I feel like are consistently way at the top year after year after year. And so I think having that mindset is really good. I also think at least for me, there's been a very much a learning curve at every level. So like I feel like it takes 3 years at each level to really get to the point where you're gonna be able to determine whether or not you're gonna hang at that level. So like for me, it took 3 years at the local level to really start seeing really consistent performance at the local level. And then, at a little bit higher, more regional level stuff, it took about 3 years. And the same thing with the pro level. I mean, my first 3 years fishing the FLW tour, I was right in the middle of the pack. I think finished in the 70s or 80s out of 150 boats all 3 years. And ever since then, I mean, the series has gone through some names, but basically every year since then, I think I've been like top 41 points, like qualified for championships or was like first guy right out. So it's been much more consistent performance, but it took, 3 years to get to that point almost at every level. And I don't really understand that. I don't know what that would be, what reasoning there would be with that other than there's just a little bit of a learning curve. I think with respect to fishing professionally, for me, the biggest hurdle was I was really proficient at our lakes up in this neck of the woods, natural lakes, grass, Great Lakes, river fishing. The reality is when you go south there, you don't really have that. You got your different types of impoundments. You got your lowland, highland, you've got your, it's most of it is all reservoir based, which is the one main area I lacked. But then when you start breaking down regionally, they all kind of fish differently. And I feel like it did take probably 3 years of visiting a bunch of those types of lakes to get a good handle on kind of how to approach them. Um, so like I've always said back in the day when they had co-anglers, like that would have been a great way to have to kind of determine just to learn a little bit about all the lakes, whether you got paired with a good angler or a bad angler. If you fish the FLW tour on the co-angler side, you were going to learn a lot by going to all those lakes. And that was one thing I did not do that I think really would have helped fast track my career.
Um, Kind of touching on the MLF thing, like you got a pretty freaking raw deal there. I mean, that kind of sucked how that all went down. Uh, but did you have a hard time? I mean, that had to throw in a loop in the mental game for sure. How did you get through that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough pill to swallow. Like it really was. Like I've always kind of felt, and this is going back to probably my pessimism. I've always kind of felt like I don't want to say I've been at the raw end of the deal, but generally speaking, at the professional level of tournaments, and I'm probably not the only angler that would say this, because I think tournaments, since I started, the actual tournament career path has actually gone downhill. So I think in
Yeah.
general, most of the decisions made poor negatively affect the anglers. But I do feel like over the course of my career, there's been a lot of decisions that like affected a small group of anglers, and I've been in that group of anglers multiple times. So, getting cut from the BPT was something that I felt like I'd finally gotten to truly where I deserved to be and what I'd earned to get there. And I think the best thing for me at that point was the fact that I had really been building a lot of other things. So had I been just solely a tournament angler, I mean, I might have jumped off a bridge. It was not an easy pill to swallow. But the reality was like I could fall back on like core tackle we had started and it was doing well. I the YouTube thing has always been really a very good. YouTube is kind of like the glue that holds everything together. It's great for everything. So like to have that and to be able to have really good sponsor support, like it was a lot easier to deal with from that perspective. But had I like earlier in my career when it was like 100% tournament performance based, it would have been a lot more devastating. And it's, at this point, it's kind of one of those things I said, like when a door shuts, you try to make other doors open. And that's how I look at it. And the way I look at it right now is maybe I qualify for the elites. And at that point, I'll feel like that gave me another opportunity. And if I was still fishing the BPT, I wouldn't have been able to qualify for the elites. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't really know, but it's kind of the path I'm on right now, and it's a matter of just trying to make the best out of it.
Well, and that's the thing too. I've felt so much for you when that happened because there's no question you are a top tier angler, and to have the rug kind of pulled out. I mean, I can't imagine. I definitely probably would have hung up my hat. I don't have the fortitude you do.
There's a lot of things. Again, you can sit here and nitpick and say I got screwed or this or that, and it is what it is at this point. I mean, it's a couple of
Yeah.
years past, and um, now I look back on it and I'm much more positive. Like, I wonder where this will take me. I mean, there's things. There's The reality is maybe it's a good thing because I don't actually think my fishing style is great for every fish counts. Like I think I've always been more of I don't want to say a single fish fisherman, but I've always been more of like, I'm looking for a isolated piece of cover that holds a fish or two versus like the schools of fish. So it didn't necessarily fit my style. Now, having said that, I had execution wise probably the worst year I've ever had fishing that BPT series. So I was the first man out in points. And so I don't remember. I mean, I think I actually finished. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember. I think I finished 50th out of 80 guys in points, but because I was a rookie, I didn't have a 2-year average, and I turned out to be the first guy out. Is really what it was. But the had I caught all those fish I had, it wouldn't have been an issue. And moving forward, maybe it's better that I'm not there. If my fishing style fits 5 fish format better, maybe in the long run that'll be better. I mean, the reality is in another year or two, it may all be the same league anyways. I mean, the tournament world has a lot to figure out. Like it really does. And there's enough anglers to kind of put up with it just not being a good career path, in my opinion. And when I say that, I'm talking tournament based specifically. Like,
Yeah.
if you can do everything else, it's a fine career path. Like if you're willing to put the work in, you can do it. But if you're really just trying to make a living based off of giving a tournament entry fee and taking home tournament prize money, it's a really, really tough way to go right now. And every year that's gotten worse. So I really do feel like the tournament organizations need to figure out a way to make this work in a short amount of time, because I don't know how long it's going to be viable the way it's set up right now.
And that's the sad thing. It seems like there are definitely regions in the country where it is more viable to make a living jackpotting local tournaments than it
Yeah.
is to make a living fishing a pro tour.
Yeah, if you have, like my buddy Todd Castledine, I mean, there's enough big high dollar tournaments in Texas. It makes better financial sense to do that than to try to fish what would be considered higher level tournaments. And that's not just there. I mean, there's a lot of places, and if you're really good on a local body of water that has enough tournaments, I mean, there's guys I could point to over in the La Crosse area in the Mississippi River.
Yep.
Like there's enough good tournaments where, yeah, it might not be their full-time job, but they are supplementing income very nicely.
Yep. We'll kind of move on to some core tackle stuff here. I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions. I am definitely kind
Fire
of
away.
a little bit of a tackle nerd. Um, so with the economy right now, do you really, has that affected you guys a lot? I mean, I know personally I have not spent the amount of money on tackle this year that I normally do.
Yep.
Does it look like it's trending better?
Well, I don't know that I'd say it's trending better. Man, I mean, I'm right there with you. I actually, I've had some conversations recently with some friends that I never really thought I'd hear them say, like, "Oh, I went to the grocery store and I didn't, buy the steak. I bought the hamburger, right, instead." Like,
Yeah.
these are people that I've always looked at as not being like rich, but being very comfortable. And they're,
Yeah.
starting to talk about having to cut back, or, one couple told me they didn't take a family vacation this year just to try to save a few extra dollars. And it's like, man, this was a family that's been going overseas, and like their family trips are like lifetime dream trips to me. And when you start hearing that, it definitely makes you go, man, I feel like there's uh not nearly as much money flowing through the economy. Now, I don't know, like I think for your everyday necessities like groceries and everything, everyone is still spending the money because they need to. But when you move into uh uh secondary source of need like fishing tackle, in my opinion, at that point people are probably cutting back. Now, like from a core tackles perspective, we're still growing, but it's a lot easier for us to grow being a small company than it is for, a big Strike King or whoever, right? Like I don't know what their numbers necessarily look like,
Yeah.
but I can tell you, talking to a lot of people in the industry, that like last year for the most part growth was flat, if not down a little bit. I think the same thing is probably looking this year. It does seem like, from what I've seen and from talking with other people, it really seems like if you've got product that's kind of in the hot area, you're holding your own. But if you're not, like this year, I've heard people say that 60 to 80% of tackle sales are like this dice rig urchin style bait, right? And if you're a crankbait guy, that's probably not good for your sales. If
Yeah.
you're, selling some sort of urchin style bait, you're probably doing decent, right? You may not be doing as well as you would like to be doing because your sales for the urchin is so good, but if everything else is down, it kind of just, levels each other out, but you're still treading water and holding your own, which is where I think a lot of companies are. I think we're seeing right now with ICAST, there's probably a lot of companies that are trying to get into that technique. And the question is, okay, well, now if you've got 50 different baits and all these different things being built specifically for that urchin game, it's like, well, is that going to cool everything else off now? So it's just one of those things where it's like, is this all trend based where you got to be on the trend? My real thought process with core tackle is, I mean, our approach has always been, we're either trying to create product that solves a problem or just hasn't been done before. Like I don't see any need to make a round ball jig head. You can go buy that from everybody else. So I feel like that's a good approach to take with respect to innovation and growth, and you're just trying to do your own thing and stay in your own lane. Um, but it also is not necessarily the easiest approach because there's so much education that's needed, and you're also trying to get people to try something they've never seen before, which can be good, but it also can be bad. So it's one of those things like for core tackle, we're not, because Johnny and I we're not a typical company. Like we're not, it's we're trying to grow it and make it more of an equity play than we are like pay for our bills at home right now. So I think we've been able to grow because we've taken most of the money we've made and just reinvested it in the company. If we had started this with the idea that this was our full-time job where we were taking money out to pay our mortgage and to pay, all these other things, I don't know that we would have gotten anywhere close to where we're at right now. But because we're able to reinvest, it's been good enough where we're able to kind of stay ahead of the curve, I think, with respect to the economy of that we're in right now. But in the grand scheme of things, we're just a small tackle company. We're not a big player on any means.
Well, you guys are definitely moving up the ladder, though. Like your guys' marketing is insane. Every time I open up Facebook, I'm either getting an ad for Core Tackle or I'm seeing one of your. But it's awesome. It never feels intrusive. Like you guys have a good setup there. I genuinely, I like seeing those, and I'm always eager to see what
Yeah,
you guys have coming next.
thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Some companies will take the approach of, if you don't use this, you're not going to catch any fish. We take the approach of like, hey, if you're struggling with this, try this, right? Like it's really more, again, like I said, a lot of our stuff we view as solving problems. Like the dice rig hook that we've got out right now and we're getting amazing feedback on, and we can't keep them in stock as it is, but the idea really was simple. It was, I don't want to have a hook, a nail weight, some sort of bait keeper, all of the stuff. It was, can we figure out a way to make this one unit? So you go buy a pack of core tackle dice rigs, you put your bait on it, and you're good to go. Like there's not a big rigging technique to it. And I think that approach has been really beneficial for us at Core Tackle. And I think, we've made products that are pretty good, pretty innovative, and solve problems. So, that's kind of what we're going to keep doing. And the reality is, like, we've got a whole ton of stuff coming. Like, we're getting into the plastics area. We've got hard bait ideas, wire bait ideas. We've got our Core Tackle Insider program, which is really a monthly membership where we send new products that we've designed to them to test and give us the feedback on it. And that's we're moving into our fourth month doing it, but the feedback's been great. The insiders love doing it. And the reality is, with the feedback we're getting, I think we're going to be rolling out a lot more new products if we're able to handle coming out with a bunch more stuff. So, I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm really excited to get some of these new baits we've got out, because the innovation is there with most of it. And from that standpoint, it's exciting to roll out new products.
Is there a whole group of guys behind the scenes designing this stuff, or is it just you and Johnny?
No, it's Johnny and I say that. I mean, it's 95%. So like Matt Becker, who's a buddy of mine, fishes the Bass Pro Tour. He came to me and said, I've got this hook I've been hand making for fishing a fluke, like blueback herring style lakes. And so he showed that to me, and we worked out a deal, like a design royalty type thing on it. And that developed our scamper rig. But outside of the scamper rig, every other product has been our Johnny or I. I mean, dude, if I showed you, we have so many crazy contraptions. It's pretty ridiculous. We definitely have had people reach out to us and say, "Hey, I've got a patent on this idea. Are you interested in partnering?" And we've looked at several things, and they're innovative and neat in their own right, but they're not necessarily what we would consider good fits for us. So we haven't done anything like that yet. Um, doesn't mean we wouldn't do it. It just is one of those things where it hasn't. And because we've got so many ideas of our own, we just have stayed trying to pound out those ideas. And if something great comes along that we can partner with somebody, we do that. But at this point, no, it's all Johnny or I. Lots of craziness in our heads. I mean, the stuff we've come out with has been great, but if I showed you some of the stuff that we've either built or had prototypes of, or at least discussed, you would just be laughing at us like, what are you talking about? Like, that's just ridiculous. But I also think that a lot of times those are the discussions we have that lead us down a path to actually coming up with a good idea. Like there are a lot of times I'll call Johnny or he'll call me and we'll be like, I got this idea. And you start talking about it, and I'll tell Johnny an idea and he'll be like, dude, that doesn't sound good at all. But but I like the concept. What if we tried this? And like, we'll go back and forth maybe for months on an idea. And then it'll get to a point where it's like, yeah, we need to figure out if we can get a prototype of that made. And, you know, uh, yeah, just another one of those things. I really enjoy doing that, right? So it's like we spend so much time and effort doing it, but it's enjoyable. And and as long as I'm having fun doing it, I'll keep doing it.
Well, and I think you guys really got something there with that insider program too. I honestly, the first month you guys dropped that, I don't. It might have been your YouTube. I seen a video of the new sled head jig,
Yep.
and I hopped on it just to get in line to get one of them because we skipping
Yeah.
docks is kind of my thing. But all awesome stuff. I mean, the that jig design's phenomenal. The soft plastic minnow you guys have is freaking cool.
Yeah. And
And
that's the thing,
and
like
oh, go
I mean,
ahead.
this month the minnow. I mean, we're calling it the hover minnow. I don't. If we go to market with it, these names might be different. Like I don't know what, but like that was an idea that we've had ever since we came out with the hover rig, where it was like we would love to build the plastic around the hover rig, like because there are things about the hover rig that don't work great with all plastics out there. You're inserting a lead weight into a plastic, so it was like maybe there's a way to at least make it easier to rig. And I think we did do that, but it's funny because we built that around the hover rig and we've gotten really positive feedback about it, but we've gotten even better feedback from people fishing it either as a weightless fluke with just like an EWG hook, and people who are fishing it with just a ball head minnow, because they're a ball head jig head, because they're rigging it slightly back and they're putting the ball head in the slot, which is bulging the slot and making it really easy to rock for like shaking a minnow and forward facing sonar. So it's like as good as we like, this is just a classic example of we build it for how we would like to fish it. And most of our products, we get a lot of people coming back to us with how they fish it. And it's like, I never would have thought of that, but hey, I'm all for it, right? Like it, and to me, that's a sign that it's a good product. If it can be used in multiple different ways, that's generally a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's even the hover rig. I use that fishing grass, stroking it like a tube, and just freaking
Yeah.
annihilate them on it. That's like the greatest thing ever. That's honestly what got me obsessed with the core tackle stuff. I've got
Yeah.
2 boxes in my boat that are just core tackle.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, and that's the thing that's cool. Like, I mean, I feel this way about the fishing industry as a whole, and I really try to stress this on my channel that it's not, there's never a very clear yes or no answer to most bass fishing questions, right? Like just because you like to do something one way doesn't mean that that's the right way for me, or it's just one of those things where it's like everyone looks at products and they fish them differently. And I just love that aspect of the design standpoint with core tackle, where it's like we design it for what we want, but it's like so many people fish it different. I mean, I'm the same way. I think the hover rig is amazing. I think it is a great fish catching tool, and I don't know that there's any wrong way to fish it. But the popping it out of the grass is one of the ways that I love to fish it. It's just one of those things where there's I think I love getting feedback from people who fish the products and use it the way I intended it, but I also love getting the feedback where they're fishing it where I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of that, or I wouldn't have done that. And if they're having success that way, it just makes me feel even better about the product, honestly.
How many prototypes do you guys normally go through before you actually bring something to market?
Uh, I mean, it varies. We've never gotten it right on the first approach. I mean, we've had some really costly, dumb mistakes. Like I can tell you with the hover rig, which was the first lure we've ever tried to have designed, we actually had the cone keepers backwards on the first production model. So, so the baits wouldn't thread up it. And it was like, I got them, I took it out of the package, I looked at it and I was like, what? Like, I was like, they screwed it up, and I had to go back and look at the designs we submitted, and it was like, no, we screwed it up. Like we sent them bad designs. So like that was probably the closest we've ever gotten to really nailing it on the first try. And I will say though, like the thing with that is I had made a bunch of, that was the first production, or I should say prototype production design. I had made a bunch already myself, like various ways of making them. So there were different I would consider those probably prototypes too, but we generally go, I would say that is generally about 3 prototypes before we get there. Um, we've we've had we've had some that have been 7, 8, 9, and then we've canned them or we've shelved them to try to figure out what we want to do with it. Like I would say probably 1 out of 3 designs we have made actually get to the point of production. I mean, there's
Well,
a lot of things that I won't say we'll never come out with, but there's a lot of things we've done that I don't know what we'll do with.
and when you guys are R&Ding something, I mean, you literally have to go to the point where you're paying somebody to machine a mold.
Oh
Am I
yeah,
correct? Yeah.
yeah. When I say prototypes, we're talking molds are being made. It's an expensive process. I would say for like jig head designs, that's cheaper from this per design. It's generally, I'll say 250 to $300 per design. But if you're doing a jig, so let's say with the hover rig, I think we've got 10 sizes of the non-weedless version. But you gotta have a mold made, a prototype mold for each of those made. So if you've got 10 sizes, that's $3,000 to do those 10. And then when you get to the point of production, you have production molds made, which are even more expensive. So jig heads are a little bit easier to handle from a prototype standpoint. If you want to do like plastics are significantly more expensive from a mold standpoint. Like a big production mold is a giant
Oh,
mold, and those things can range, I mean, all over the place from 3 or 4 thousand for a smaller one up to like 10 or 12,000. So I mean, it's an expensive process, and that's one of the issues. If you want to make, say, a soft plastic, I mean, you could easily be in for $10,000 on molds and prototyping before you get to actual production. Well, if you're, it's not like it's not like you're making much per bag of plastics or per bag of jig heads, right? So, like, just to recoup that initial investment, you might have to sell, 5,000 pieces. I mean, it's to get to the point where you're actually, I guess, profitable on that one item. It's, I think there's a lot of garage shops out there, and because they're doing everything in house, and they're, a lot of times you can buy molds and pour your own lead, and you're doing it on a small quantity, you can make it, relatively profitable. If you want to get to the point where you're actually selling in a lot of retail, you got to invest in the bigger molds. You got to invest more in the product and hope that you're able to sell it down the road to recoup a lot of the investment.
yeah. Um, so kind of going back to that sled head jig a little bit, what got you to come up with that? That is by far the most innovative jig head design I've seen for a flipping jig in a long time. I mean, I would say the last real big step in a skipping jig was the Arky head. What brought you to that point?
Yeah, so that really was the brainchild of Johnny Schultz. He loves to fish offshore brush piles, and like his whole big thing is, I want to make like what he considers to be the most weedless brush jig out there. And the the design really was one of those things where, in talking about it, we were like, and this is our logic. I'm not saying there's any science behind this, but our logic was, you want a head that will keep the hook upright, but you also want a head that will actually keep not roll, but keep the hook point away from the cover. So we wanted to create a little bit of a drop down when we did the drop. So we had a bump down on, I think, one of the initial jigs. And then after looking at it, we were like, well, what about it? What if we created a sled portion, which then helps you walk it like, so if you got your limb and you get your jig coming up and you get the jig head over, at that point, you're on the hook shank. But we were like, what if we carry the sled back? Will that help you walk the whole jig past that limb, right? Or that piece of wood? And that was really the idea behind it. And we found that it really does come through wood very, very well. And the other thing then is, we use that sled portion as a bait keeper, where if you've got a big chunk plastic, it really locks in there really good. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. Falls a little bit different because a lot of weight's transferred back. Skips really well. A double wire weed guard is really good in wood presentation. So we like, that was honestly our third bait. We thought it was going to be our third bait to come to production with, behind the hover rig and the tush, and we just kept going back and forth on little tweaks in the design, to different hook setting, like different types of hooks. Like, because I like, I'm much more of a power fishing flipper, and he's more of like the offshore casting jig. And we've just kept going back and forth on what version and what style. And, we've had all these different slight modifications done to the heads. And ultimately, the ones that we chose for the insider program were actually earlier versions. And, um, yeah, I mean, it was like, the sled jig was a big start to what we call the Core Tackle Insider program, because we had gone back and forth on it so much. We kind of just got to the point where it was like, we want more feedback. Like, I would love to know what other anglers would think about these jigs. Like, which version would they prefer? And in talking about it, it was kind of like, man, I wonder if there's a way to get that feedback. And that kind of was the start of the idea of the Core Tackle Insider program. So the sled jig is one that, I mean, I've caught so many fish on it at this point and testing all the different versions. I really, really like it. But there's also a little bit of me that every time I hear jig, I cringe a little because it's like all of the time and back and forth and like the money spent on molds. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, we either got to come to market with it or just get done with it because I'm done hearing like different designs for the sled jig. Um, but I think it's a really good jig. I think it's got some innovative features to it, and like I said, it's a fish catcher. We've caught a lot of fish on it.
Well, and I noticed too, like the attention to detail on there, the way you guys poured the lead up around the line tide. Not many people do that. I mean, it just, the way you guys designed it to come over wood, skipping docks coming through, or, the pontoon lifts coming over that
Yeah,
bar. It's phenomenal for it.
yeah.
So I think you guys definitely got one hell of a jig there.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, I like it too. I'm hoping to come to market with it. I mean, the feedback's been really positive on it. I'm just not sure what that date looks like. That's the other feature or function of really being a smaller company. For us, it's been like we launch a product, we hopefully that goes well. If that goes well, that kind of helps us launch another product, right? But we
Yeah.
we can't we're not in a position where we could just like roll 10 products out at one point because it would be financially irresponsible of us to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure the amount of capital it takes even just to roll out a product is probably way
Yeah.
more than anybody really thinks of.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about having to, I mean, you got your design costs and your prototyping costs and all of that, but then you've also got, I mean, there's a lot of different costs, but to actually produce the product itself is very expensive if you want to have relatively decent inventory. But there's a lot of other costs in that too, like with respect to the wire weed guards. If you're going to make, let's say, 1,000 jigs, you don't buy just with the case of the sled jig, which is double wire, you don't buy just 2,000 wire weed guards. I mean, you can, but you're going to pay significantly more for 2,000. If you buy 50,000, you get a much better rate. So, and you want to buy enough, hopefully, for several different runs. So you're generally buying more hooks than you need. You're buying more wire weed guards, more skirts, because you want to have enough from an inventory standpoint that if it does sell well, you can make enough while you're waiting 8 weeks for your skirts to come in, 8 weeks for your jig hooks to come in. So it's kind of this, there's a much heavier investment early on for a new product. And then once the product's out, you're kind of just managing the inventory, but it's much more expensive than just, hey, I want this many baits built. I need this many baits built, but I'm overbuying on basically every part that goes into that product.
Yeah. Um, Two, I gotta say your guys' new jig is absolutely phenomenal too. I think that's such a neat design, taking the tush swim bait.
Yeah,
I mean, it's got such a unique action. Um, you guys are coming out with amazing stuff. Definitely keep up
thank
the
you.
good work. Um, so I'm gonna probably let you go here. We'll do my final segment. I call it Final Cast. The question. Oh, actually, first, go ahead and plug all your sponsors and everything. I don't want to forget that.
Oh, I mean, I'm very thankful to have very good sponsors. Bridgeford Foods is these guys up here are truly my lifeblood. I mean, I probably would not still be fishing if it wasn't without them, but they're a great sponsor. Skeeter Yamaha's a great sponsor. Abu Garcia, Berkeley, the Pure Fishing brands, Durasafe batteries. I could go on and on. I got a whole bunch of really good sponsors that I'm very fortunate to work with.
Good deal. So my last question here is, if you could leave every bass fisherman with one lesson that took you years to learn but could save them years of frustration, what would it be?
Man, there's so many little tidbits I could share with that. I think I mean, ultimately, time on the water is the most important thing. Like, I think in today's day and age, and I guess I'm part of this, like with YouTube, you want to go watch a video, you want to read an article or talk to your buddy, have them tell you what to do, and then like just go out on the water and do it and catch fish. That generally doesn't happen. I think instinctually anglers get better more time on the water because we develop our own experiences that go up into our noggin, and the more times we're on the water, the more information we're building and putting into our own brains that allow us to compute that information so that when we're on the water in the future, we kind of know what to do instinctually versus like having to truly think about it. I think, this happened 4th of July weekend. I was up in the Hayward area. I was at my parents' cabin and I was fishing with my family, and there was a small boat that pulled up kind of into the middle of a bay. And this is a lake I've grown up on. I fished my entire life, and they just pulled up in the bay, two guys in probably a 16-foot rowboat with like a 20-horse engine, and they just started fan casting in the middle of this bay. And they were probably in 30 feet of water. It's not like the type of place there'd be schooling fish. And I mean, I didn't pay that much attention to it, but my wife Sarah turned to me. She's like, "Are they going to catch anything out there?" And I just kind of was like, Honestly, I don't think so. I feel like they're just casting into the wind, like going through the repetitions." And the reality is, they probably fished once or twice a year. They were up there on vacation. This was after dinner. They went out for a couple hours, and they just were like, "We're going to pull up into this bay." For anglers like us who are on the water so much, there's so much of everything that we calculate without even having to think about. Like
Yep.
areas that look good, places that would be good from a seasonality standpoint, where we're not just going and pulling up randomly in a part of the lake and starting to cast with the expectations that we're going to catch any fish. But everyone starts like where those anglers were. When I first started going to that lake, when I was literally 3 or 4 years old, I probably would have done the same thing. Like when I was in high school, like I would have just gone and randomly chose a place. But there's that time on the water aspect develops information that we gather and use in the future. And no matter how much we watch on YouTube or hear from our friends, you got to do it. You got to go out there. You got to actually fish. You got to put the time in and become better from that standpoint. So, as good as it is for us to try to grow and educate ourselves off the water, you eventually have to go do it on the water to truly see the process, if that makes sense. So I would never underestimate the actual act of fishing. Like I think that's, when you live in the North Country, if you deal with months of ice, it changes our we kind of lose out for those several months in my mind, where a lot of other anglers get to fish year round. And I do believe that that hinders us as anglers a lot of time, because it's like that's several months we're not on the water continuing to work on whatever, casting skills or understanding the water. And I just that I'm always jealous of the southern anglers who are out fishing when it's January here, and our fishing is through ice if we want to. So time on the water is a major player if you want to become better.
Awesome. No, that's good. And then I thought of one more, a little bit selling my part. I got a tournament coming up on Tomahawk this weekend, and I know you're pretty good out there. No spots or nothing, but give me some
Yep.
tips, something to look for, trying to get on some smallies.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't fished out there in a while, just to clarify that.
Yep.
But if you're looking for smallmouth, I can tell you, back in the day, generally starting this time of year into the fall, there were a lot of uh smelt feeder, or not smelt, Cisco feeders. And if you and again, I haven't been out there since forward facing sonar, so maybe, and I don't know that the Cisco are still out there the way they were, but a lot of the best fish in tomahawk would be out. You're talking Minocqua tomahawk, or are you talking
Yes. Yeah.
tomahawk?
Minocqua
No,
chain
yeah,
tomahawk.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Um, Yeah, so they're in my opinion, the biggest smallmouth are chasing Cisco. So you get around a lot of that deep humps, the Cisco will be in 30 plus feet of water. The smallmouth will push the Cisco into any sharp breaking shoreline, humps, shoreline, contour line changes, things like that. That's where the biggest smallmouth are. Now, having said that, I don't know that the smallmouth are like when I was fishing a lot out there, the smallmouth were a good, consistent play to catch a nice quality bag. But I feel like the largemouth have been bigger players out there the last couple of years.
Yeah, yeah,
But
we're
but
doing
if
it's
I were going looking for winning smallmouth, I would be offshore over 30 to 60 feet of water looking for Cisco.
awesome. Well, at least I know I was on the right track then. Thank you very much, Matt. I greatly appreciate your time. Like I said, keep doing the good work. A lot of us are rooting for you. It's nice having a Wisconsin guy shooting for the Elite Series. I know you're not necessarily a native, but you're a very well
I mean, at this
appreciated
point, it's
transplant.
yeah, it's been a while. I still root for the Bears, but I root for the Packers as well. So we're still good. But I appreciate you having me on very much. And if you need me back on in the future, give me a call.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching the Timberline Bass Podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, comment, all that normal stuff. Thank you very much for your support.